Welcome to Coaching, conversations with successful and brilliant coaches, people that have produced results on the field and with people. And we're privileged to have two, and it's an interesting dynamic today. We have two remarkable coaches. They are also father-son. So there's a whole dynamic here that probably is unique. Could be a unicorn for all I know in soccer. But I've known David now for going on 4.5 years, a little longer. He's part of my family. I married into the family. I had to go to Rochester to pass the family test, which was very difficult, by the way.
Yes.
And David and I have been pals for that length of time, and we started to deliver some coaching programs together about 2 years ago, which have been really powerful. So how I know David professionally is he's a coach, and he does it for a living. It's not a sidebar. It's not something that he does as a hobby. He has to make a living coaching. So he's at stake to be a successful coach. And he's coached in professional soccer, college. First he came up as a player in high school and then played college and then played professional and then went through the ranks and Chicago Fire Coach of the Year, which I thought was absolutely remarkable, freshman or second year in coaching. Then the LA Galaxy, they won a championship or two with him. And then the national team for a while. And got them out of their drolls to win some amazing games against some amazing teams. And now is coaching in a professional soccer league on the East Coast. So that's David professionally. So he wins.
Great. Well, thanks, Mark. You gave a nice background to my career. I did grow up in Rochester, New York. I did grow up playing sports of all kinds throughout my childhood. Sports has always been a very important part of my life. And I took to the sport of soccer. I was a little too small for football, and the rest was kind of history. Played through high school, as you said, played through college. Always kind of had a sense that I might coach one day, but I put a lot into my professional career until I retired in '82 and then began coaching as an assistant at Virginia. Before I took the head coaching job back at my alma mater at Cornell, and that was certainly a big jump, being from an assistant to a head coach at Cornell for 10 years, and then the opportunity came to join the pro ranks, and I did that, and fast forward to this past year where I was the men's national team coach until I took this position currently with North Carolina Football Club here in Raleigh, and it's been a 35-year terrific journey, all the ups and downs that coaching brings. And I'm very pleased to be doing something I love. I was very blessed, my wife and I, to have Ian come into our lives in 1988 when I was at the University of Virginia. Ian has been sort of like me. A lot of people tease us that when we're on the phone we sound alike and we think alike, but he's been a part of my career in every stop and every place. Also a great athlete as a youth athlete and soccer player in every city we've been in. And he's been around all of my teams, all of my locker rooms, but to his own credit, forged a great career in high school and also in college at the University of Illinois, Chicago, where he was on a NCAA Sweet 16, I believe it was, or team where he scored goals in that tournament and was a very important player at the collegiate level. Took a little stab at playing professionally, but also has dived in headfirst in the coaching ranks. And he was at the University of Wisconsin working with that program for a short bit. He did some work with our LA Galaxy youth teams, accepted an second assistant role at the University of Santa Clara, and most recently has accepted a big role as a first assistant at Creighton University, which is a top 20 national power in soccer for many years, and it's a terrific role for him. So He's followed that path, and he's going to be very successful.
I find it to be a really unusual relationship. In fact, I think if dads could learn how to coach, we'd have better sons. That's so. Somehow you. So tell me about your dad. Tell me something, not about his accomplishments, but about who he is for you and how this came about.
Well, I think first and foremost, outside of the results and everything else in the coaching he's done that I've been around, the thing that's always stood out to me is the long-standing relationships he's been able to develop. And, whether it was players he coached collegiately at Cornell or from the teams all up until the point he is at now, he doesn't hear all this, but I do, and people do, that there's never really a bad thing said about him, and everybody continues to value the relationship they have with him. And I think that just speaks to why he's been able to be so successful as a coach, and quite frankly has been one, if not the biggest takeaway for me in my career, is how I approach players that I get to spend time with, and utilizing the relationship for better for both parties, and hopefully leaving a lasting impact. And so I think that's the part that you don't read about or you don't see within results, but ultimately is so important.
David, what does that relationship look like to you? And Ian, what does that look like to you? David, why don't you go first?
I think first and foremost, there has to be a relationship with the individual that you will eventually be coaching with. I think it goes beyond just the sport. I think it's important that that there's a trust factor and there's a safe environment factor, so that you're not just feeding them athletic information. There's got to be a deeper sort of sense of trust and understanding with who that person is, both sides, myself included and the athlete. And once you get through that barrier, I believe now information as a coach, when you begin to really coach and try to make improvements with the athlete, you have a better sense of getting someplace, because you've kind of crushed the barrier. There's no ulterior motives. There's no hidden agendas. Things are out in the open. And I think the more you can expose that, the more there's trust. And if there's trust, there's hopefully respect. And then it sort of feeds into each other. My
work is, because I understand the coaching has two sides. You've got the player side and the knowledge of the game and the capacity to generate trust, authenticity, vulnerability, the whole deal that you just talked about, David. But the job that I see I have is, who is a coach? Who does a coach need to be able to generate those kinds of relationships? What changes do they need to make within themselves to be able to have that capacity where people trust them, where people feel safe with them, as David points out? So you're climbing the ladder now. Tell me, and you're the same age or in the same generation as your players. So Ian, how is that different for you? How did that change the relationship for you?
Yeah, I think it is unique. Going off what you just said, though, I think definitely for me, what I found out through this process is, in order to do that and open up and have these relationships and be successful as a coach, I think you have to know who you are first. And if you don't, and that takes time to really understand and appreciate as well. So I think in this, as I'm now into my 6th year coaching collegiately, I feel like that's been the biggest development factor, which then also has allowed me to connect with the players that we have that are closer in age, and having gone through what they're going through not too long ago is a unique window of time that I get to be in now, to be able to have those relationships. Because at some point I'll be further removed and they're going to be the same age. So it doesn't always stay that way. But no, it is, I think they appreciate the fact that obviously always being open and honest with them, but also having experience what they're going through and really being able to relate, and them knowing that and feeling that is is just makes them more receptive to the message that you try to convey and help them however you can.
As a coach, the thing I'm finding is you got to be willing to share that.
Mm-hmm.
Some people just can't do that, so they're unable to coach. You've got to kind of rip yourself apart to be able to get into the heart of a player. So do people ask you about coaching all the time? I'm sure. So when they say, well, what does a coach do? How do you answer that question?
Well, a coach does a lot of things. Obviously, you're managing. In my case, I manage 23 people. And it's a challenge to get in the heads of 23 people. But part of my duties is to have a clear understanding of the athletes that I'm dealing with. Some coaches, old school coaches, say, well, you treat them all the same. Well, fundamentally, there's certain things that everyone has to fall in line with, but you can't treat each one the same because each one is so different. And so a big part of my job coaching is first getting an understanding of who I'm working with, the vulnerabilities that they have, the strengths and weaknesses that they have, and know that I can be an influence in their lives in terms of how I approach them, how I communicate with them, and deal with them on a daily basis. And my season's a long season, and it's a grind, just like the business world. It goes for 12 months a year, and so you have to have a certain balance in your delivery, a certain way you communicate. But communication is so vital in the relationship of each and every person. So it's a lot of work. And then, of course, there's the X's and O's. That's the easy part. To design a week of training and getting on the field. So there's on the field work, there's off the field work, there's weekend work when the curtain comes up and you've got to compete, and it starts again.
I was just thinking as you were speaking, the difference between business and sport is you get to practice. You can't practice in business. You got to you got to do it because you're there. Mm-hmm. But most of the coaches that I know have spent time with sports coaches think practice is way more important than field time, than game time. So Ian, how do you get your players ready because they're your age?
College soccer specifically in and of itself is really unique because our season is essentially 3.5 or 4 months long. And within that time, we're playing twice a week. So practice becomes a little bit more of a maintenance piece because we just don't have the time to train so hard with the amount of games we have in a condensed window of time. But, it is, I think when you use practice in a collegiate setting as kind of the relief for them in a way, where they're so bombarded with academics and commitments and advising meetings and what have you, that you want to create an environment when they get on the field that they really enjoy it.
Question came up for me, speaking about being in the same generation. How do your players take correction from you?
There's a respect factor because they understand that I've done this for a good amount of time now. And I think that they understand that our head coach wouldn't have brought an assistant coach in who he didn't fully trust to immerse himself in the program and lead the guys. And so, you always have occasional guys who are tougher to crack and they want to talk back because they feel, like you said, they're in that same generation. But I'd say generally speaking, we don't come across that issue very much. And I think that's just the way that they've been brought up through their youth of playing time and into college.
When you deal with pro athletes and higher ego worlds, and so how do you get the capacity to deliver correction to people that are pros?
I think it all starts with the relationship and where that begins. I mean, it may sound like I'm name dropping, but the most high profile professional I've ever worked with was David Beckham at the LA Galaxy. And I use that example because I didn't need to teach David how to strike a soccer ball. I didn't need to teach David uh, a lot of tactics. But I wasn't there to be his best friend. But there were many moments where we didn't talk about soccer. And as I got to know him and he got to know me in terms of my approach, that I didn't just want to befriend him because he was Beckham, but once we got through that barrier, the little bits of information soccer-wise that I could sort of speak to him about, he really absorbed. And so it's your starting points in so many ways with professionals. But the fundamentals of teaching and mentoring and being there and having some empathy, that doesn't change whether you're a collegiate athlete or a professional.
So David, what do you need from the player? Who does the player need to be for you to be a great coach?
Well, the player, for me to get my message through, I need the player to have an open mind. I think that's very important. And there's a lot of insecurity with players. And I'm talking from the highest levels to all levels. So, if the player can put aside their ego and put aside their insecurities, and maybe I'm there to help them do that, they have to have an open mind to learn. And I think, peeling back our initial conversation, if there's a safe environment and there's real conversations and communication, I think the capacity to take in information gets greater, because most players are insecure. They don't want to hear the bad stuff or areas that we can help them improve. So I think if we can find our way as a coach to open that up to them being engaged and setting goals, obviously. So if a player wants to play at the very highest level, as a coach, I'm going to say, here's how I think I can help you get there. If you're open to what I'm about to tell you and how I'm going to work with you, then I think we can get you there. So it's a little bit of all of that in my sense.
One of the things we say on the coaching development we do is you need to be committed to what the player is committed to. And you're a commitment to his commitments or her commitments, and in order for them, and they are insecure, they're human, so they have all this stuff going on that we all have going on. And what Ian said, and the point was made, is just the more heart to heart you are, the more of this is available. You're allowed to be a coach. So, but being heartfelt, you got to, what Ian said again is you got to know yourself better and better and better to be able to appreciate whatever that is going on for yourself. Ian, your relationship is probably different in terms of what do you need from your players to be able to coach them?
More than anything, it's just them having a growth mindset, because they're still so young into their careers, especially if they have ambitions to go on professionally. But even within a 4-year span in college, their development is crazy from freshman year to senior year, because not only, you have to remember, not only are they developing as soccer players, but having a growth mindset, I mean that as well as a person.
I'm moved by what you say, because it takes a certain interaction between a player and a coach, and the relationship between a player and a coach, to generate that enhanced performance on the field. What you said, Ian, is about helping the players develop as people. That really, and Dave said the same thing, is really the heart of coaching, is seeing your avenue happens to be coaching a sport. But that's not the mission. The mission is to have a better person on the other side of that conversation. How do you sustain your success over time as a coach?
As I've grown as a coach and been in the game this long, currently we've won a few games, but you just can't rest on what you've done a week ago. It starts over, and so you try to have the right balance of rewarding the players with verbal cues like, hey, well done, guys. It was a great week. You deserve to win on the weekend, but that's now past you. And now it's Monday, and we're gearing up for the following Saturday, and it's a whole different approach. And I think you try your best to balance the perspective of not feeling too comfortable, and when we lose, not feeling as though we'll never win again. And that's takes some experience, I think, over time.
So let's end this particular interview by talking about how do you have group generate themselves as team? What do you do? Ian, let's start with you.
It starts for us in first recruiting the right type of guy, who has or who can show you that he has that mindset and willingness to be adaptable with his teammates. And I think it's maybe a little bit easier in college. I don't want to say it's easy, but it's easier because inherently they're coming into a program that's pretty well established with guys who have been here and take a lot of pride in being part of this program. That's what college sports is why it's so special. So a lot of times it's either you're on board or you're not. And if you're not going to last long in a program because there's already this built-in culture at the good place, not every place.
All these metaphorically can be translated into business. So what you said is that they're all for the same mission. They're all for the same vision. They're all for achievement as a unit. Mm-hmm. And if you can do that in business. And the other thing that you said is the word culture, and context in this world is the culture that's created. No, they walk into a culture, you become a correlate to that culture. You do what's appropriate to that culture.
Yeah.
David, what do you have to say about winning and have them continuously winning?
I couldn't agree more with Ian in terms of the culture. And at my level, when we don't win, we get fired. And so from a personal sense, as a coach, you have a responsibility to the ownership, to the community, to your team. But I would say that the players that I recruit wouldn't change to what, obviously they're pros. Ian's point of bringing the right people in. When I have agents call me about players, the first thing I ask about, I don't care if he's left-footed or right-footed. Is he a good person? What's he like in the locker room? Will he get along with people? Will he be disruptive? Is he open to learning? Those are the questions I ask first, because obviously an agent's he's a pro, so he's got some talent. And if he passes that test, then we get into those fine lines of positional and tactical and all the rest.